Hi, everyone. We will get started in just a minute. We're just letting people trickle in. Okay, it looks like we have everyone that we're probably going to have join us tonight. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the County of San Diego Department of Parks and Recreation for the East Otay Trail Alignment Study Environmental Impact Report Notice of Preparation Scoping Meeting. My name is Juliet Orozco, and I'm the Environmental Planner and Project Manager for this Environmental Impact Report. Also with us tonight, we have Deborah Mosley, Chief in the Department of Parks and Recreation, Chelsea Oakes, Group Program Manager in Parks and Recreation, Jonathan Teofilo, Environmental and CEQA Consultant from ESA, and Jessica Geisler, Program Coordinator in Parks and Recreation, who will be helping facilitate the meeting and the Q&A. First, we have some housekeeping stuff. For this meeting, we're using the Zoom webinar platform. You won't have a microphone or camera access, but you will be able to write in with the questions or comments that you have using the Q&A feature. Just click on that Q&A icon in your toolbar and type in your question or comment. We will either respond directly in the answer section, or we will do our best to address your comment in the live Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You may also want to write down the phone number and meeting ID that we have on the screen right now. You can use this to call in if you lose your internet connection at any point during the meeting. A recorded version of tonight's meeting will also be made available online after the presentation is completed. The links to the recorded presentation will be available on the project webpage. If you are accessing tonight's meeting on a mobile device, the Q&A feature is located on the bottom of your screen. In this meeting, we will discuss the purpose of today's scoping meeting, a project history and overview, an overview of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA process, the preliminary environmental impact report, or EIR scope, the EIR process and timeline, next steps, and a Q&A session. The purpose of the NOP and scoping meeting is to provide an overview of the project and to solicit input and feedback from various agencies, stakeholders, and the public pertaining to the scope and content of the environmental information that will be included in the EIR. We will also be providing information on future opportunities to provide input and participate in the EIR process later in the presentation. The East Otay Trail Alignment Study, which serves as the basis for this environmental impact report, has been a monumental effort between 8 agencies that manage lands and operate within the study area. This multi-agency project was kicked off in 2016 and included the following agencies: County of San Diego Department of Parks and Recreation, City of Chula Vista, City of San Diego Public Utilities Department, Otay Water District, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Wildlife Refuge System, the Bureau of Land Management, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and U.S. Border Patrol. All 8 agencies coordinated to complete the East Otay Trail Alignment Study, which was finalized in 2020. Additionally, this project in EIR would not be possible without grant support from the California Wildlife Conservation Board. We acknowledge and appreciate the partnerships with agencies and stakeholders who have helped us to complete the East Otay Trail Alignment Study and have further partnered with the county for this environmental impact report. The East Otay Trail Alignment Study had multiple opportunities for public engagement and input, both formally and informally. First, online surveys were provided to the county's mailing list and stakeholder groups for distribution to individuals within their respective organizations. Project participants were also able to distribute the poll to their constituents. 2 public workshops were held. Workshop number 1 was held in March of 2017, and workshop number 2 was held in June of 2018. These workshops included a poster board session, a PowerPoint presentation, an interactive GIS system, a trail design and amenity questionnaire, and a user questionnaire. Public comments from the workshops and all meetings were utilized to complete the study. In addition to these formal outreach efforts, stakeholder meetings and coordination with partner agencies was regular and ongoing. The comments from those meetings were also utilized to complete the study. All information regarding the workshops and the completed study can be found on our website. Today's meeting represents the first opportunity for public engagement and input in the environmental review process for the project. There will be additional opportunities for public input throughout the process. This slide shows the East Otay Trail Alignment Study area, an area of EIR analysis in red. The study and analysis area is comprised of the communities of Eastlake, Otay Ranch, Rolling Hills Ranch, Bella Lago, San Miguel Ranch, and Hamul, along with 9 separate ecological preserves and habitat management areas. The study area spans the jurisdiction of the study's partner agencies. The East Otay Trail Alignment Study, finalized in 2020, provided a planning framework for future development of approximately 80.5 linear miles of trails and pathways within an interconnected trail system in a 70,000-acre study area. The study also includes conceptual plans for 13 new trails and pathways that would provide opportunities for recreation, including hiking, biking, and horseback riding. 7 staging areas and 2 trailheads to provide access to trails and pathways were also included in the study. This map on the screen is the final approved map from the study. Recognizing that the legend may be hard to read on the screen, this map is also available on our website. The EIR will analyze the trail alignment framework programmatically, in addition to providing a project-level analysis of 5 trail alignments. The 5 project-level trails include the Upper Otay Lake Loop Trail, the Otay Lakes Road Pathway, the Otay Mountain Truck Trail Expansion, the Proctor Valley Road Pathway, and the Lower Otay Lake Trail. Project implementation would require minor grading and improvements, such as the installation of trail directional signage and trailhead amenities, such as interpretive signage and trash enclosures. There are already several existing staging areas and trails in this area that are incorporated into the study and EIR analysis. The California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, is a California state law that is intended to inform government decision makers and the public about the potential environmental effects of proposed activities and to prevent significant unavoidable environmental damage. There are several types of CEQA documents, but the East Otay Trail Alignment Study project will be analyzed under an Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, which is the most stringent possible CEQA document. An EIR discloses the potential impacts of a project, identifies mitigation measures, and describes feasible alternatives to the proposed project. An EIR does not approve or deny a project, as environmental impacts are just one of the factors decision makers consider. The components of an EIR are an executive summary, a thorough project description that includes construction activities and ongoing operations of the project, an environmental impact analysis, including the environmental setting or the baseline state and context of the project, thresholds of significance, or the criteria the project is compared against to determine if there are impacts, project impacts, which are discussed in terms of no impact, less than significant with mitigation incorporated, and significant and unavoidable or unmitigable. Cumulative impacts, or the possibility of impacts due to proximity or interaction with other project areas. And lastly, mitigation measures, or ways to reduce impacts. An EIR also includes alternatives to the project, which show how impacts could be reduced if a scaled back version of the project or no project at all was adopted. And finally, a statement of overriding considerations if there are significant and unavoidable impacts for decision makers to weigh benefits of the project against potential impacts. This slide shows the 20 resource areas and mandatory findings of significance that are required by CEQA to be analyzed in the EIR. While the EIR will analyze all the resource areas shown, a preliminary review of the project indicated the resource areas shown with an X next to them could be potentially impacted by this project. We are asking for input on the scope and content of the EIR as they relate to these resource areas. This slide shows the process and estimated schedule for the EIR process. We are currently in the scoping period, which began on January 6th and will run through February 21st. The scoping period is longer than the required 30 days to ensure all stakeholder input can be included in the process. Once the scoping period is over, the county will prepare the draft EIR. We anticipate that the draft EIR will be available for public review in spring 2024 for a minimum 45-day comment period. The county will then respond to comments and prepare the final EIR. Depending on the quantity and nature of the comments received, we anticipate the EIR to be finalized and brought to the Board of Supervisors for certification in spring 2025. The dates shown are all estimated and subject to change for a variety of reasons, including stakeholder input and coordination and the complexity of technical studies. The next step for this project starts with you. We are asking that stakeholders provide their comments on the scope and content of the EIR. We will then utilize those comments to form the scope of the EIR. This step segues into the preparation of technical studies and drafting the initial study and draft EIR document. Once complete, this document will be released to the public for a minimum 45-day comment period. Once these comments are received for the draft EIR, We review the comments to make necessary changes and additions to the EIR. The county will also respond to all comments and include those responses in the final EIR document. If it is determined that major changes are needed to the analysis or mitigation, a revised draft EIR would be circulated for public comment. Once the final EIR is complete, it will go to the County Board of Supervisors to be certified. There are opportunities for public input and participation in the EIR process during the scoping period with the comments we are soliciting today, the draft EIR public review and comment period, and the Board of Supervisors meeting to certify the document. The county is also committed to continued coordination with its partners, stakeholder agencies, and organizations, as well as members of the public throughout the process. On this slide, you will find how to submit written comments for the scoping period. We ask that any questions asked verbally or comments provided in the Q&A function are also provided as written comment via email or mail to ensure their inclusion in the CEQA process. The link to the final East Otay Trail Alignment Study can be found at the bottom of the screen, and we'll also be including that in the Q&A. We will now take questions and comments. I will leave this slide up unless any specific slides are needed for additional information for a question. However, all of this information is also available on our website. For the purposes of this meeting, please try to keep comments and questions to questions about the CEQA process, questions about the project description, and questions and comments pertaining to the EIR. Thank you, and we can now get started with the Q&A with Jessica here with us as well.
Hi there, good evening. Thanks so much, Juliet, for all of the information you just shared. We appreciate that. We do have a couple of comments that have popped up here in the Q&A pane, so I will read those. Before I get into the longer comments, which came through from David, I wanted to really quick ask a question from Libby. Libby is asking if the NOP itself appears to be if it's actually 2 pages, or if it's longer than that. So do we know the length of the NOP?
So it's 1 page front and back is the actual length of the NOP, and that all of that information is also available on the website as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so we've got some comments from David. I'm going to read those through, and then we will have a transcript of this meeting. There's going to be a recording from tonight that we'll post to our website, stparks.org. We also are taking note of all of the questions and comments that are coming through. Please also feel free to send those directly to us so we can incorporate them into our info gathering portion of this process. All right, so David's saying, here are some initial scoping comments by the San Diego chapter of the Sierra Club. The majority of conserved lands in the trails planning area was purchased or set aside as mitigation for development and is now a part of the MSCP Preserve. Example, the City of San Diego's Otay Lakes Cornerstone Lands Preserve, Rancho Homol Ecological Reserve, San Diego National Wildlife Refuge, etc. As such, trails are allowed only to the extent that they are entirely compatible with habitat and species preservation under the MSCP and subject to final approval of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So the main comment here is that no trails should be included in the plan or EIR alternatives that have not been approved in advance by those agencies and each agency owner or manager. So taking all that into consideration, and Juliet, can you speak a little bit to how we work with other agencies as information comes through and as the plan and EIR alternatives are fleshed out?
Sure. So we have a few different ways that we can answer the question, and I first want to say that we've noted all of the comment portion of your comment here, and we will incorporate that into the scope of the EIR. In terms of coordination with our partner agencies or other agencies, we have not yet come up with a full schedule of how exactly we're going to coordinate, but we do have regular meetings with different stakeholder agencies and plan on using those to start conversations so that we can schedule additional meetings if needed. And then also just making sure that everyone who needs to get the information is getting all of the information that's available.
Thank you. So to confirm, when we're looking at this, the EIR is going to be analyzing whether those trails, if there are proposed trails on conserved lands, if they're compatible with those various land management rules and plans and other directives, right? For example, the proposed trails on the Rancho Humo Ecological Reserve, would they be compatible with California Department of Fish and Wildlife rules for management of that same area? So just to confirm, that's kind of the way the process works. We look at each jurisdiction and we look at what is and isn't allowed, and then we explore opportunities at that point.
Hi, Jessica, Deb Mosley here. Can I jump in and provide a little bit of the background that I think will answer a lot of David's question? Everything that you and Juliet just said is 100% true moving forward, but I wanted to give a little bit more of an explanation of the historical efforts that have taken place. As Juliet mentioned in the PowerPoint, there was a study that was done, initiated in 2016 and finished in 2020 with all of the agencies that we acknowledged. It was 8 agencies, including the county, and all the wildlife agencies in City of San Diego and Chula Vista. And we went through for multiple years talking about all the different land use constraints, MSCP, the cornerstone lands, deed restrictions. We looked at everything when we came up with the study and determined where the draft trail alignments were. And all the agencies agreed to these trail alignments, looking at all of the restrictions. And so we definitely took that into consideration. We did put the East Otay Trail Alignment Study link into the chat, so you can take a look at that. That's all documented there. And so this is now the step where we're just doing the EIR on the study, but all of those opportunities and constraints were definitely looked at, and we are ensuring that any of the trails that are identified are consistent with all of those conservation and planning documents. And so it's, yeah, appreciate that comment's really important. And we have worked for 4 years with all of these different agencies to get to this point, and we will continue to coordinate with all of the agencies moving forward, as well as with the stakeholders.
Thank you, Deb, for that background. That's very helpful for myself, and I'm sure for many of the attendees who are joining us tonight. We have a question coming in here from Libby. Libby's asking if the environmental analysis would consider the potential long-term impacts from trails and recreationists on wildlife behavior. Great question there. Generally, these are indirect impacts, yes, but potentially far-reaching and are on an individual, population, and community level. So the question really is here about what are we doing to protect our native habitats, and looking at recreational use and forecasting how that could impact the environment moving forward. This would be a great question for our resource management team, of course. Juliet, should I hand this one to you, or is there somebody else who might want to jump in?
I can get started on this one. If we need our CEQA consultant, we can have him join in. But typically, an EIR will consider potential long-term impacts in general. I just had the question in front of me. I wanted to make sure I answered the whole thing. But it will, the way that the questions are set up in CEQA is that there are very specific questions that set the parameters for what could possibly be analyzed within an EIR. So the county will absolutely go through every single one of those resource areas and analyze those. They do analyze the potential short-term impacts and impacts for the life of the project as well.
Great, thank you. Another question here from Libby is, will the county collaborate with recreation ecologists for the preparation of the EIR? So who is involved in the process of developing that EIR?
So as Deb was saying earlier, a lot of the long range planning aspect of the trails has already been done. And that's shown in the completed and final 2020 East Otay Trail Alignment Study. Moving forward, this really is the opportunity to give input from the public, as well as agencies typically always give input into what they would like to see in the EIR. So that's kind of where that scope of the EIR comes from, in addition to following all the requirements. It's just also good to have this type of public input to see if maybe they have a different perspective on something that we can add additional analysis to.
All right, thank you. Here's a question coming in from Leslie. Leslie's saying, from my experience in the Himmel Mountains, these areas are being actively used for migration. Has Customs and Border Patrol been consulted regarding trail alignment in light of traditional migrant trails? Go ahead.
Yes, they have. They were one of our member partners in the creation of the study.
Fantastic, thank you. We have a couple of questions from Leo Hamill asking if there's a way to see on the map specifically if any of the parcels are on private land, or if any of the proposed trails would cross private land.
So if any trail were to cross private land, it crosses multiple jurisdictions, but just in general, if any trail were to cross private land, there would have to be an agreement between the landowner and the county to make that happen. It wouldn't be a situation where you walk into your backyard one day and there's a trail. So that would not ever be something that you would have to kind of worry about. If there was any private land involved, there would be coordination with the landowner way ahead of time. But
okay, so if they haven't heard from you, then they are not affected by the potential trail.
Most likely, yes.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, let's see here. Okay, this question is coming in from Frank. How will impacts from creation, management, and attempted decommission of unauthorized trails be analyzed and mitigated? Every trail has generated unauthorized trails, so these are predictable impacts. Great question about trails.
That is a very good question. I might need to defer to Deb on some of the things, but I do want to say as a general statement, kind of one of the purposes of creating such usable trails with amenities and making sure that they are the types of trails that people want to be using and want to be staying on. I think this project is kind of one of its goals is to help avoid that from continuing. Though there won't be the need for kind of de facto parking areas or things like that, because they're going to be available to the public, as well as well-marked trails, trail signage, things like that. I don't know, Deb, if you wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, absolutely, Julia. I can jump in here. And Frank, thank you for that question, because it actually is an important reason why we kicked off this study back in 2016. As you know, in the Otay area, there are trails that are being used that are not authorized, and that is a very sensitive area for habitat and for species. That all of these jurisdictions have partnered together, had the same common goal to work together to find where the appropriate trails should go, so that we're minimizing or completely avoiding any impacts to sensitive resources, and then take the opportunity to be able to identify where there has been some historical unauthorized trails and find those. I wouldn't call them decommission them because they weren't authorized, but then we can take the opportunity to ensure that they are restored moving forward, and then have a fully approved trail alignment that is in the right place and having better control. And so really, as these agencies, we work together as land managers to find an appropriate solution And that was definitely something that we looked at. And that's something that now with the EIR, we're going to be able to look at the proposed alignments, do the environmental impact report of that, and then be able to identify where we need to do restoration and obviously any mitigation for the project. So thank you for that question. It's I think it provides some of the context for why we kicked this off to begin with.
Great, thank you, Deb. And that's actually a really good point. I'm thinking of a couple of our properties. TU1 and River Valley is a great example where, there is a trail plan, and there definitely were some unauthorized trails. And so the team has been working really hard to block off those areas of unauthorized trails, to revegetate the area with natural vegetation, and then also to provide signage to educate people about why the trails exist where they do. And then it's kind of up to our operations team to help maintain those areas. So we've got, our boots on the ground, our park ranger team. They do daily patrols in all of our park properties. They look for any potential issues. If there's a need for additional educational curriculum, they might run some guided hikes just to kind of explain that whole process to residents in the area who want to come out and visit. So, it's one of those things. Once an area is developed, it's kept up. We definitely have, all hands on deck here at Parks and Recreation, where, operations works very closely with resource management and to ensure that all of those recreation opportunities are balanced with efforts to protect and preserve the land and the local environment. So again, thank you for that question, Frank. Fantastic. It did give us a chance to kind of explain more of the background there. Okay, we've got quite a few questions in here, so I'm just going to jump on one here without picking an order. All right, this one's coming in from Dan. Dan saying that given that even California Department of Fish and Wildlife Ordinance can't deter illegal mountain biking, how will adequate enforcement resources be guaranteed? How many new full-time rangers will be hired? And will uses that are known to engender illegal off-trail use be restricted or eliminated? Another fantastic question. I really wish our region manager, Charles Gilband, was here with us today, because he can absolutely speak to that. Every park property is different, and we do our studies in advance to identify what we believe is going to be the park use, and then we track park use once an area is opened up to the public. So sometimes that means we increase park patrols. Sometimes we get to roll them back. Sometimes it allows us to identify new staff members dedicated to specific parts of park properties. So until the area is formally introduced to the public, an operations plan is not ready to share. But I will say it's sort of a living, moving document, and it adjusts with trends at that specific property. So if there's any issues with illegal mountain biking, enforcement, of course, would be to go out and to speak to those who might be going off trail. It would be to be providing some signs and some other educational opportunities, and also working closely with local law enforcement. We have great relationships with county sheriff, and we also rely on our park visitors to, if they see something, to say something so that we can take the appropriate course of action. So great question, Dan. We'll keep our eyes on this, absolutely. And I think it's definitely something worth including in your notes via email, so that we have something to track as we move forward in this process. Okay, George is asking, or Jorge, apologies if I mispronounced that. What types of trails are being considered for this area? Would it be single track, 6-foot wide footpaths, ADA nature trails, etc.? It might also be too soon to determine what type of trail could be in an area like this. But Juliet, can I hand this one to you, and you can share a little bit about the trail design process?
Sure. So there are actually already really fleshed out descriptions of types of trails and kind of what can be expected on all the trail sites. That can be found at the link that's provided on the bottom of the screen. I think it also got put into the chat function where the final study is. There is every possible imaginable map that you would ever want to look at for this, and also thorough descriptions of what different types of trails look like and different types of amenities. And then in addition, there are trail designs and guidelines that all agencies agreed upon. But pretty much everything I think that you would be looking for would be in that final study.
Great, thank you. All right, this next question is for Deb. This is coming from Dan. Dan's asking if the EIR would consider that peripheral trails around Otay villages 13 and 14 could pose unique harm to surrounding preserve areas due to human, dog, and cat trespassing and are not needed to serve project residents. Will the EIR consider eliminating those two peripheral trails?
So I think Dan and both David asked questions related to Village 13 and Village 14. So Jessica, I can go ahead and kind of answer both of those. So if you look at the trail study and the final map, I forget the exact language that we use, but basically what we say around the villages is that at the time when we were doing the study, and actually it's true now, there were not final trail plans for both Otay Village 13 and 14 because they were still in the development process. And so given the uncertainty of what was going to happen with the development of those and also the other Otay villages, we put down what we thought were potentially the trails at that time with the caveat, and it is written in the study, that says that those are tentative pending the development plans being finalized, which is still uncertain at this time. And so what we're doing with the EIR is there's certain segments that we are doing planning level, kind of, more specific EIR analysis. And then we have some other trail alignments where we're doing more programmatic analysis based off of what we, I'm sorry, I said planning level, I meant project level analysis for 5 alignments, whereas we're doing programmatic analysis for other alignments. And then the reason for why we're doing that is because some of these trail alignments, including what's around the villages and some of the other ones, we don't have enough information to do project level analysis. And so that is something that we'll be documenting very clearly in the EIR. And yes, if the anticipation, and this kind of goes to some of the other questions that are coming up, which does relate to the Otay villages as well, is that implementation of these trails, it's going to be a very long-term effort because there's multiple land managers and land ownership for where all these trails are, which is also why we're doing project level and programmatic level analysis, depending on the trail alignment. So hopefully that answers on both David and Dan's questions related to that.
Thanks, Deb. That was helpful. So it sounds like we've got some additional information on trails coming in from our own project team here. Karen, I believe you're here on the call with us. It sounds like you've got some information on the types of trails that could potentially be built based on type of area, again, completely in coordination with the agencies that manage that property. Karen, did you want to include any or add anything to what Deb just shared about urban and suburban trail measurements?
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit, Jessica. Thank you. So as part of the East Otay Trail Alignment Study, like Deb was mentioning, when we drafted that study and worked with the wildlife agencies and all the stakeholders that Juliet mentioned earlier. Juliet, I don't know if you're able to go back to that stakeholder screen really quickly. I think that would be helpful. But as we were developing the trails, we did consider the type of the location that each trail was going to be at and what was appropriate for that location. So whether it was a really primitive location where we really didn't want more than a 2 or 5 foot trail and in that specific area because of the site constraints related to biological resources or cultural resources or other sensitive resources. So some of these trails were drafted in the study document as being very, very narrow. And others where we did have a little bit more room and maybe weren't as sensitive, we were able to create more pathways and pathways and trails that were a little bit wider than that. And when we are doing that, we did work with all of these stakeholder agencies. And really this document is a joint document with all of these agencies. So just wanted to highlight that and highlight that we did try to, make sure that we are citing trails in appropriate locations and making sure that the way we cited them, the width of them was appropriate for the specific constraints of the site as well.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful for me, at least. I'm hoping also for the rest of the attendees on tonight's call. Okay, so considering the sensitive species that could potentially be in the area, how do we get information about what lives there? For example, there's a question coming in from Dan asking if the EIR would consider USGS tracking data that shows Proctor Valley is used by golden eagles for foraging. Will eagle experts be retained to ensure that human activity does not interfere with critical foraging? And this is with reference to the nesting success of those eagles. So let's see here. A good.
I can jump in on this,
Perfect,
Jessica, and Karen or Juliet, you can maybe, if I don't answer correctly, you can jump in on the what we're going to do moving forward. But in terms of the study, we used that data, yes, Dan, and we worked really closely with Robert Fisher as well on the alignments. He provided multiple comments on the proposed alignments, and we utilized USGS's data to determine these alignments. And then that's going to be very important moving forward with the EIR for the actual analysis as well. So I do want to clarify, because a lot of these questions are related to this. When we did the study, it was, we really looked at all of the available biological and cultural data that we already had from many different agencies and pulled that together and did an extensive analysis before we came up with these trail alignments. And so that's, we were ahead of the game when we started. Now we're starting with the EIR and going through using the data that we already have looked at, and we're doing our additional surveys where we had some gaps, but we're using all of that data to make sure that we're doing a very thorough analysis with the EIR.
Great, thank you, Deb. All right, this question's coming in from Libby. How can the county produce EIR analyze and account for management, monitoring, and enforcement that's needed on segments of trails on lands that the county doesn't manage? For example, land that could be managed by California Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM, etc. So I know that our project team does work very closely with these different agencies to ensure that we're both sharing information and findings, and also that projects, regardless of exactly where that jurisdiction is, that we're all working together to ensure safe passage for all, wildlife included. But let's see here, Juliet, do you want to share some information about how we work with those agencies?
Yes, so just kind of an overall thing about CEQA and the EIR process. So the county is acting as lead agency for the EIR. That doesn't mean it's solely a county project. It really is a collaborative effort between the different partner agencies, and those are called responsible agencies or trustee agency, depending on their role. Just because the county has taken that lead agency role does not mean that in any way it takes over jurisdiction of the other agency's land. It means that we are taking the lead in preparing the CEQA document. All other agencies are required to review the document and ensure that it meets their standards for their areas. So I think that's kind of a helpful piece of information to see how things work. Then within the EIR, there will be a mitigation monitoring reporting program. And within that document that's within the EIR, it really outlines who's responsible for what mitigation, when they're responsible to enact that mitigation, in a really specific really specific description of what that mitigation is going to look like to ensure that that mitigation takes place. And that could also involve the contractors responsible for certain things if they're building things. And it could include different forms of mechanisms to ensure that all the agencies are on the same page with how they're enforcing that mitigation.
All right, thank you. Okay, so while we look to see if any more questions come in, David, we have note of all of your comments here. Thank you very much for that. Super helpful, and this will be part of our conversation moving forward. If anybody else has questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A pane. In the interim, Juliet, do you want to pull back up that timeline so we can take a look at what's next?
Sure. Do you want this one or the actual timeline?
Either. If you want to, let's reshare the information with our attendees to make sure there's no questions, at least with regard to dates.
Okay, so yes, this one has the dates on it. As you can see, we are right here, kind of right at the beginning of the process. So if anyone has any questions on the schedule or what next steps look like.
And then all of the information that we'll be posting will be up on stparks.org. I imagine you also have a contact list going. So if anybody has specific questions about this property, they can reach out to you directly, Juliet.
Yes. My name is available on the website, my email, phone number, it's all on there. So if anyone needs to reach me, you can find that information on the website.
Fantastic. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. Do you want to pull your email back up? I think that was on the last slide that you had here, just in case people want to take a quick screenshot.
Yes.
All right, so that email address right there, countyparks@stcounty.ca.gov, is a great place to send information. Once you send something in, your information will be saved on a contact list. So any future communications about this project will be sent to you, including future public meetings. And all of the comments you shared today, once again, they will be part of our recorded meeting, but they're also being tracked on our project team. So every piece of feedback you share with us is definitely part of the process moving forward. Okay, I don't see anything else. For me, it was a pleasure. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Let's see here. Libby is concerned about enforcement staff on public lands. So it bears repetition to see what the process would be to help enforce those, I'm imagining, the trail alignments and the new policies that are put in place. So definitely valid concern. I know for county parks, we do trail patrols every day. We do work very closely with our agencies who help manage land with us. We understand that some agencies may not have the same resources we do here in San Diego County, and that can be tricky. We do rely very heavily on a volunteer workforce as well, and I imagine we'll be sharing a lot of those same volunteer contacts. Again, not most people don't know kind of where one jurisdiction starts and when ends, but there's a common desire to ensure that there's safe passage for all. So our volunteers cross jurisdictions on a regular basis, and they certainly help. But I will go back. Libby, thank you for your concern there. Definitely something we'll continue to monitor moving forward. And if there's a specific area that you have concerns about, let us know and we'll see what we can do. If it's not our land, we can certainly work with the agencies to come up with a solution. All right, so that's all I have for you tonight. It was a pleasure helping you out with Q&A. I'll hand that back to Juliet to close out the meeting.
Okay, and thank you, Jessica, so much for your help with that. As she mentioned, all the information that you might need to contact us or find additional information about the study is available on this screen. And if you have any questions, I'm available, and my email and phone number are both available on the website. Thank you.